Okay, welcome everyone to our second writing lesson. In today's lesson, we will be talking about line graphs, bar charts, pie charts, how to report key features and reporting data using two pie charts. So let's begin. Okay, let's take a look at line graphs one more time. As we said before, that line graphs show change through time, and we have two axes. We have the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. The horizontal axis demonstrates the progression of change for these three keys: the rising cost of living, traffic, and lifestyle, through time, obviously. The vertical axis, however, illustrates the change in numbers. Here we have 10,000 people up to 90,000 people. We need to spend two minutes before we start writing anything, I mean, in the exam, to try to understand the line graph. Okay, look at the keys, look at the years, look at the number of people, and look at the lines themselves. We have three lines. Most of them are going up, with the exception of this rising cost of living line. It went a bit down from 2000 to 2010. So we need to report these features, these key features. You need to write an effective report about such a line graph. Ask yourself some questions. Are there any common trends? Are the lines going up or down? Does any of the lines show a significant increase or decrease? Because this is the type of information that you need to report. If there is a sudden increase or decrease, and so on. Which lines have a similar trend? Maybe you have three lines that are going up rapidly through a 5-year period. So you need to report that there are some similarities between these lines. So you can report that. Let's talk about task achievement before we go further with the lesson. It's the mark that you're given for how well you write the report. There are some issues, however, that can affect your score. For example, not including an introduction, an overview, and or a conclusion. Missing the most important information or trends. I mean, some people would report maybe some insignificant data in the report and leave out the most important features. Not including enough of any data or misreporting data. This is very important. You can't, and I repeat, you can't misreport data. You have to make sure that you are reporting correctly. Giving your own opinion about the data. Don't give your own opinion and don't guess. This is a big mistake. Also using an inappropriate tone. We are writing a report, so this is an academic report, so use the appropriate tone. It should be formal. Writing less than 150 words. This will, of course, will affect your score. Writing a conclusion that doesn't summarize the main features or that report no key information. You shouldn't do that. Your conclusion should summarize the main features of the data of the report. That's it. So let's take a look at this question, task 1 question. The line graph below shows the main reasons people gave for moving away from a particular capital city to the countryside. So you need to, the first step that you need to do is to underline the main or key words. I would underline the main reasons for moving away. That's it. Some people would underline capital city and countryside, but it's obvious. Anyway, let's look at this report, which is not a good example, okay, but it's a bad answer actually, but we will use it to explain some concepts. The line graph illustrates the main reasons people gave for moving away from a capital city to the countryside. The main reason was traffic. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. The main reason was traffic. Maybe the writer wasn't actually talking about this line graph. I'm not sure. The main reason isn't traffic. It's the rising cost of living, because as you can see, almost actually 65,000 people moved away from the city in the 90s, and it went up to 85,000 people in 2000. So that's a lot of people, much more than traffic. So this is the first mistake. It's misreporting the data. Don't misreport the data. In 1990, 66,000 people left the city because of this. Because of this refers back to traffic. Let's look at 1990. Oh, that's another mistake. Here it's only 20,000, and the report says 66,000 people left the city. This is another mistake. Don't misreport your data. Followed by 85,000 in 2000. In 2000, it was 35, not 85. Another mistake. 70,000 left in 2012. Actually, the line only goes to 2010. Okay, it doesn't talk about 2012. So it actually went down in those last 10 years. So this paragraph is full of mistakes. Actually, it's all one big mistake. Moving on to the third one, it was different for the other two reasons, which both started a lot lower than rising cost of living, and both kept going up between 1990 and 2012. Subsequently, both categories saw large increases. What do you think is wrong with this paragraph? Actually, it's trying to describe what's happening in the report without actually using the data. You should report the numbers and describe those numbers. So this is another mistake. You shouldn't do that. You should write a description and use the numbers themselves. Okay, so these are 5 mistakes about the report. The first one, some of the data and categories are incorrectly reported, as we have seen in the previous slide. The third paragraph used descriptions without data to support its arguments. This last one. So you should actually support your descriptions with the data. Number 3, there is no concluding paragraph. We don't have any. We don't have a concluding paragraph here. It's a big mistake. Also, the introduction is using pretty much similar words as the question, and this should be avoided if you want a high score. Use your own words, use paraphrasing, and use high-level vocabulary. 4, the answer is obviously less than 150 words. 5, the language lacks the use of adjectives and adverbs. Of course, we have some adjectives and adverbs, but we could do much better than that. We have the main reasons. We have subsequently large increases, clearly, initially, and so on, but we can do much better than that. Let's now look at the same report, actually the same line graph, and the report is written by another writer. The line graph sets out the main motivations people expressed for relocating to the countryside from the city in the years 1990, 2000, and 2010. The overall trend for the period is an increase in numbers moving away from the city. Okay, now this paragraph has the introduction and an overview. So it's much better than the previous one. Let's move on to the following slides where we have some comments about this report. As you can see, the first one, this is a good introduction that uses paraphrasing, and we have an overview. The first statement or sentence is an introduction, which is a paraphrasing of the question itself. And the overview that follows the introduction, the overall trend for the period, is an increase in the numbers of people moving away from the city. I'm sorry, it should say the overall trend for the period is an increase in the numbers of people moving away from the city. The overview summarizes the whole report in just one sentence. It's different from the introduction. The introduction is a paraphrasing of the question, but the overview is a summary of the report, of the visual data in one sentence. Okay, the first paragraph, according to the graph, the main reason for relocation was the rising cost of living in 1990. 65,000 people left the city because of this. Then 85 people left in 2000. Then 80,000 people moved away in 2010. Let's go back to the previous slide and check if these are reported correctly or not. Okay. The main reason for relocation was the rising cost of living in 1990. 60,000 people left the city because of this. The main reason, of course, was the rising cost of living, and 60,000 people left in 1990. That's correct. Then 85 people left in 2000. That's also correct. 85 people here. Yes. Then 80,000 people moved away in 2010. That's also correct. So it actually increased by 20,000 initially between 1990 and 2000, before going down by 5,000 in those last 10 years between 2000 and 2010. This drop of 5,000 could have been because people generally had less money in 2010 than they did in 2000. Okay, let's go back to our comments. This paragraph is too mechanical. You should avoid listing the changes to a single category like this. Focus more on highlighting the key figures and trends. Don't speculate and don't suggest reasons for any change. You just need to report what you can see on the graph, so don't make assumptions. Okay, what I mean by these 4 sentences. What I mean actually by that the paragraph is too mechanical. The paragraph actually lists the numbers in those years. That's it. It doesn't describe the change. 65,000 people left the city because of this, because of the rising cost of living. Then 85,000 people left in 2000. Then 80,000 people moved away in 2010. So this is just listing the data, not describing. When you describe, use adverbs to explain the change that's happening. Okay, we don't just put, the report is not just putting those numbers along the years in words. No, we don't do that. About don't speculate and don't suggest reasons for any change, and don't make assumptions. The writer said that this drop, if you go back here, there is a drop of 5 years of 5,000 people from 2000 to 2010. This is a drop, but the visual data, this line graph, doesn't explain why. The reasons behind this drop or the reasons are not included in the report. So don't talk about the reasons. Okay. Actually, the writer said this drop of 5,000 could have been because people generally had less money in 2010 than they did in 2000. So they couldn't afford to move. Okay, this is a big mistake. Don't just guess why people couldn't move. It's not your problem to guess, okay? It's not your job actually to guess. So avoid doing this. Moving on to the third paragraph. It was a different story for traffic and lifestyle. Both had the same number of city leavers at the start of the period. Subsequently, both categories saw increases, with traffic first going up by a large number between 1990 and 2000. And then even more steeply after that. Lifestyle levers rose consistently over the whole period, going up to 30,000 initially, then up again in 2010. Actually, this section is trying to explain it tries to describe the change using adverbs and adjectives with the numbers, but it fails to include key data to demonstrate the points. It should have used more numbers. Okay. The last one. So what does it all mean? For me, the answer is crystal clear. Overall, the graph shows that a huge number of people moved away from the city to the countryside in a 20-year period. Okay, we have a conclusion, but it doesn't really summarize the key features. The tone is also inappropriate for a report. It sounds like you are writing a magazine article. Your tone should be formal and scientific because this is a report. For me, no, we shouldn't say that. So what does it all mean? Are you asking the examiner? For me, no, I'm not talking about your opinion. Okay, the answer is crystal clear. No, this is not an appropriate tone for a report. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about the conclusion. You should not include data in your conclusion, and you shouldn't report a new key feature, maybe something that you have forgotten. Don't report new data in the conclusion. It's just a summary of the trends of the whole graph. Okay, and you don't want to repeat a specific information. Here we have three conclusions, and we need to figure out which one is best. Okay, the first one, to sum up, people left the city for three main reasons, all of which rose significantly between 1990 and 2000. Actually, this is a mistake. It was between 1990 and 2010. Traffic changed the most rapidly, lifestyle changed the least, and rising cost of living was the only reason that went down. Okay. The second one, overall, the graph suggests the number of people relocating to the countryside rose across the period. Cost of living was the main reason for relocation by some distance. Despite a fall in numbers in the second half of the period, traffic saw the greatest overall increase, with lifestyle seeing a relatively slow but steady rise. All in all, that's the third one. All in all, the rising cost of living rose from 65,000 to 85,000 and then 80,000, and was the highest of all three reasons. Traffic had the biggest increase from 2,000 people up to 60,000 people, while lifestyle changed the least. Okay, I want you to pause the video and think about these three paragraphs. Which one is a summary of the trends of the whole visual data, of the whole line graph? Okay, then when you're done, come back and continue. Okay, let's discuss these three conclusions. The first one is not a good conclusion because of two reasons. To say that people left the city for three main reasons is not actually true. The graph didn't supply three reasons. Sorry, the graph did supply three reasons, but there could have been others. These are not the only reasons people leave for. Okay. B, there is actually something that I said in the previous slide, misreporting data. It says rose significantly between 1990 and 2000. Okay, it should be 2010, not 2000. Also, lifestyle did not change the least. No, that's misreporting data. Let's talk about the second paragraph. This is the best conclusion. It's less mechanical than A. Mentions the main features and expressed what had started to happen by the end of the period. Okay. Overall, the graph suggests the number of people relocating to the countryside. The graph suggests, okay, that the number of people relocating to the countryside rose across the period. It rose. That's a fact. This is a fact. Cost of living was the main reason for relocation by some distance, despite a fall in numbers in the second half of the period, because there was a decrease, a fall in the numbers by 5,000. Traffic saw the greatest overall increase, with lifestyle seeing a relatively slow but steady rise. So I'm just summarizing the data. The last one, all in all, the rising cost of living rose from 65,000 to 85,000 and then 80,000 and was the highest of all three reasons. This is the worst one of the three. Not only has the writer included data in it, because we shouldn't include data, but also repeats what has already been stated in the main body. The writer did not present a summary of the main trends or features, just writing the same data. That's it. Okay. Using adjectives to describe change. Look at these sentences. Rising cost of living. Actually, these are not sentences. These are just notes. About the rising cost of living, the highest point of any reason in any year, 85,000 in 2000, the only one to decrease to 80,000 in 2010. So I used the adjective, the highest point of any reason in any year, okay, the highest. About traffic, greatest overall rise, 40,000, most notable rise between 2000 and 2010, most notable. About lifestyle, most consistent and stable increase, only 20,000, remained the lowest of all three reasons. About traffic and lifestyle, joint lowest in the first year presented. They were the same in the first year, 20,000 in 1990. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7 adjectives. You need to understand that you must use adjectives and adverbs to describe the change, to describe the visual data. Okay. Avoid, this is very important, guys and ladies. Avoid using adverbs that give your opinion of the data. You should not talk about your own opinion. The number increased worryingly in the period. You just report the numbers. You don't worry about the numbers. It's not your concern. You are just reporting data. Avoid using adverbs such as shockingly, surprisingly, amazingly, predictably. Okay, don't use these adverbs that express your own opinion. Okay, now we have 7 good adverbs that you can use: significantly, progressively, noticeably, gradually, sharply, markedly, and steadily. I want you to pause the video and match each one to its definition. It might be a bit difficult. You might think that they are all similar somehow, but they are not similar. They are different, actually. Okay. Pause the video and come back when you're done. Okay. Now let's begin with significantly. Significantly means the change showed by the line is major. It's big. Perhaps in comparison to another line on the graph. This is very important because a change of maybe 20,000 people in 1 year could be significant in one line graph and insignificant or just tiny in another graph. Okay, if the graph is giving you data in millions of people, so 20,000 a year is not big. Okay, it's not big a deal. So it depends on the graph. So in comparison to another line on the graph. The second one, progressively. Progressively will go with the change is slow and consistent because it's progressive. Slow but consistent. Noticeably, 3. The change showed by the line is clearly visible, especially in comparison to another line on the graph. Gradually. Of course, it comes from the word gradual. The tendency to change on the graph is slow. It's gradual. Sharply. Sharply will go with the change indicated by the line is fast and dramatic because it's sharp, sudden. Markedly. The change showed by the line is clearly visible, especially in comparison to another line on the graph. Okay, it's the same. Steadily. Actually, I meant that markedly is has the same meaning as noticeably. Okay, something that you can notice, that you can mark. Steadily, the change illustrated by the line going up and down is at a consistent rate without many fluctuations. It's steady. It doesn't go up suddenly, then down suddenly, and so on. There are no fluctuations. Okay, avoid using the same grammatical structures throughout your report. Try to use different grammatical structures as you write the report. Let's see an example. Look at these 4 sentences. The category of lifestyle increased the most consistently and stably. I could say something like, the most consistent and stable increase was seen in the category of lifestyle. What I mean by that, you have to use different grammatical structures. Maybe you can, for the first description in the first paragraph, you could use increase as a noun, then describe it with an adjective like most consistent or most stable. Then you could use increase maybe as an adverb, increasingly, and so on. So I mean that you can use an adjective with a noun, then you could use an adverb with an adjective, and so on. Don't keep using an adjective and a noun, for all your sentences. You have to use a variety of grammatical structures. Let's look at the second one. Traffic rose steadily, so an adjective with an adverb, as a reason for moving to the countryside between 1990 and 2000. I could use a different sentence and say, traffic experienced, of course, this is a verb, and we use experienced and so as in reports, a steady rise. This is now an adjective with a noun, not rose steadily. This is a verb with an adverb. Traffic experienced a steady rise as a reason for moving to the countryside between 1990 and 2000. But then increased markedly between 2000 and 2010. I could say something like, but then there was a marked increase between 2000 and 2010. And an adjective with a noun. The last one, the number of people moving to the countryside for lifestyle reasons grew consistently across the whole period shown in the graph. I could say something like, saw a consistent growth. So instead of using a verb with an adverb, I used a completely different verb. So then a consistent growth, an adjective with an adverb. So you need to mix your grammatical structures. For one sentence, use a consistent growth. Then for the following one, rose steadily. Then the most consistent and stable increase, and so on. Okay, now I have given you pretty much everything you need to write or to correct the report written about the line graph, and this is going to be part of your homework, inshallah. Moving on to pie charts. As you can see, this is just an example. The pie chart represents the main way of finding out the news by adults in the UK in 2015. I mean, this particular pie chart. It represents the main way of finding out the news or accessing the news by adults in the UK in 2015. You have 5 keys, and each one, of course, has a different percentage. You have to understand that pie charts do not show changes over time. They just show percentages. Not like the line graph, okay, or bar charts. No, they don't show change through time. They just show you percentages. You need to understand how to report the data in the pie chart. So you need to think about the most important key features before you even start or thinking about writing. For example, the largest portion of people, about 40%, watch the news on TV. Okay, it's about 40%. Of course, you will. I'm going to show you the keys later on, but I'm just trying to give you a heads up. Okay, so about 40% of them, of the people in the UK, watch the news on TV. Then just over a third of people access the news online. Just over a third, okay, of people access the news online. Approximately 15% of people read the news in print. Radio is the least popular way to get news at just 7%. Only a tiny minority didn't specify how they find out about the news. So these are the main key features that you need to use to write a report. This is actually your paragraphs. I mean, other than the introduction and the conclusion, those 5 points will make up your report, the paragraphs in your report. Okay, describing percentages. Before we talk about the report itself, to describe this pie chart, let's talk about describing percentages. When you describe data in pie charts, try to use a variety of ways. For example, actually, you can keep using percentages: 31%, 25%, 64%. It's tedious, and there's some pattern to it, repetition. Okay, try to use a mixture of percentages and fractions to show the range of your language or your vocabulary. Use modifiers such as almost, just over, just under, approximately, if the figures are not exact fractions. For example, if maybe the people that are using watching the news on TV, maybe the number is 48% or 49%. I can't say half exactly because this isn't half. Okay, this number is 48 or 49. It's not 50%. So I can't use half. Okay, I could just say something like just under half, just under half. Okay, it could mean 48 or 49%. Just above half, maybe it's 51% or 52%. If I say half of people in the UK watch the news online, for example, and the actual number is 48% or 49%, or even 51 or 52, then I'm misreporting the data. If it's 50%, then say it's half of people. Okay, but if it's around the number, you can use just under half or just above half. Okay, use fifth for 20%, fifth of people. If it's maybe 32%, use around a third of people, because a third is exactly a third of 100% is 33.3%, right? 33.33%. And a 32% is not an exact third of people. So I could say around third of people. I could say just less than a third. So around a third of people or just less than a third. What if it's 77%? I could say something like about 3/4 or approximately 3/4. Okay, they mean the same thing. What if it's 92%? I could say approximately 9 out of 10 people, approximately, because this isn't 9 out of 10 people. It's not 90%. If it's 90%, I could say 9 without approximately or about or around. No, if it's 90%, I could say 9 out of 10 people are watching the news online, for example, if it's 90%. If it's 24%, almost a quarter, but it's not a quarter. If I said, if it's 24% and you say it's a quarter, you have made a mistake. You are misreporting data. It's not 25%, it's 24%. Almost a tenth of people. Yes, it's 9%, almost a tenth. It's not a tenth. If it's 10%, then say tenth of people. Okay. If you don't say almost a tenth of people, then you are misreporting data. About 2/3 of people. 2/3 are 66.66%, right? 66.66%. But if the number of people that are watching the news on TV is 65%, then you could say 65%. That's fine, but you need to use, as we said, a variety of ways. I could say about 2/3 of people, because a third is 33% multiplied by 2. It's 65%. Because I said around or about. If it's exactly 2/3, I could say 2/3 of people. That's it. Okay. Using modifiers to describe percentages. This pie chart shows the frequency with which adults in the US find out the news through social media. Let's use modifiers like almost, about, over, under, a little, approximately, slightly over, slightly under, roughly, or just over or just under, to describe each section without using percentages. So we need to describe each section. We're not writing a report at all. We're just writing just one sentence to describe each section. Doing so, we will understand how to report key features using percentages. No, we will not use percentages. We will use modifiers, okay, and fractions. So Here we have never, 38%, hardly ever, 18%, sometimes 26%, and often 18%. We don't actually need to use percentages in all our sentences. For this exercise, we are going to use something else, modifiers. Almost two-fifths of adults in the US never read news on social media. Okay, remember, the pie chart shows the frequency with which adults in the US find out the news through social media. So we said here almost two-fifths. A fifth is 20%, right? So two-fifths are 40%. When I say almost two-fifths, I mean something that's almost 40%, which is the never group. Okay, this is 38%. Okay, moving on to the second one. Just under a fifth often access news on social media. Just under a fifth. We said that a fifth is 20%. So here actually we have 18%. Okay. Social often access news on social media. It's the often the yellow part, the yellow group. It's 18%, so I said just under a fifth. About a quarter of people sometimes get their news from social media. Sometimes, so it's the sometimes group. It's 26%. Can you say a quarter of people without about? No, you can't. You must use the modifier about, or around, or just above. Okay. Just over. I'm not sorry, not above, just over. Just over a quarter of people, because it's not an exact fraction. It's not 25%. The last one, a little under a fifth, because you can report, you can use different modifiers with something like 18%. You could say it's not a fifth. Okay, it's not an exact fifth. So for number two, we said just under a fifth, and for the last one, a little under a fifth. Hardly ever access news on social media. Okay, so almost two-fifths is 38%. Just under a fifth is 18%. Even if it's not 19%, I would say I would use the same expression. About a quarter, 26%. It could be 27%. It's fine. A little under a fifth, 18%. Okay. We need to become aware of the areas in which we make mistakes and focus hard on trying to avoid these mistakes. You need to maybe leave 2 minutes at the end so that you can check your report for mistakes. I mean, after you're done, of course, writing it. Because some simple grammatical mistakes can reduce your grammar score. Let's talk about that for a bit. This is a report about the previous slide. It's called Find the Errors. I mean, the slide called Find the Errors. The pie chart show frequency with which adults in the US uses social medias to obtain news. Overall, it's clear that less than half are using it in regular basis. I want you to pause the video and try to find all the mistakes. Try to find all the mistakes. But before that, I want you to take a look at this. There are 8 categories for the errors in this report. Tenses. There could be mistakes using the appropriate tense. Subject-verb agreement. This is also something that people cannot fully understand for some reason, even some advanced users of the language. When I say a number of people and the number of people, should I say a number of people is or are, and the number of people is or are? A number of people is coming, or the number of people is coming, is appropriate, for example. Okay. This is subject verb agreement, the agreement between the subject and the verb. They have to match. Singular, plural, countable, uncountable nouns. Can I say informations? Can I say data, the data indicate, or should I say the data indicates? Punctuation and capital letters. This is another area of mistakes. Articles, the, a, and zero. Not using articles at all. Prepositions, active and passive, and adjectives, comparatives, superlatives, and so on. So now I want you to pause the video. Take as much time as you need. If you take an hour, it's fine. You are learning. Okay. Pause the video and come back when you're done. Now, these are the correct, this is the correct version of the report. Let's read it. The pie chart shows the S, okay? The frequency should take the article there, with which adults in the US, capital U and capital S, use social media. Of course, adults, because of subject-verb agreement, adult use, not uses. Social media, not medias. It's an uncountable noun. And the expression is on a regular basis, not in, it's on a regular basis. Then here we have, they never access the news. They never access the news. In the previous version, that the news was never accessed by them. No need for the passive, because they are the ones that actually access the news. Okay, then they are not the passive here, they are the doer. Okay, so I can't use the passive like that. The highest of all categories. This is another mistake. The second highest category is those who sometimes find out the news from social media sites. Around a quarter, 26% of those surveyed selected this response. They are the ones that selected this response, which is 12% fewer, not less. More on that on the next slide, don't worry. There was a tie, because it's a singular noun, it should take the article A. It's there was tie, no, there was a tie. For the least, not for the less, the least. And we should put a full stop here, then a capital E, because it's the first word in the sentence. Then to conclude, social media is used. I can use passive here, it's fine. To get news often or sometimes by just 44%. It's evident from the data, that the majority of citizens do not read news on these sites. Okay, so this is how we report. I mean, these are the mistakes, the correction of the mistakes. And now let's move on to something very important. When using less or fewer with percentages, if the percentage is describing something uncountable, use less. For example, if it's a percentage of time, use less. However, less time, for example. However, if it's a percentage about something countable, use fewer. Fewer people, not less people, fewer people. Less milk, less sugar, less time, and so on. But fewer people, fewer cars, fewer machines, fewer phones, and so on. Okay. And this is a common mistake in reports, by the way. So you have to watch out for using less or fewer. Which sentence is better? This is another exercise. We're still talking about the pie chart, but let's talk about these 5 points. Each point has 2 sentences, and we need to decide which sentence is better, the first or the second. Let's, for example, read the first one. The pie chart data indicate that the primary news source for under 25s in Brazil is social media. Before we continue, we said the pie chart data indicate. Some people would say indicates, but actually, look at this note at the bottom of the screen. The word data is an uncountable noun, but it can be logically, you will use is and indicates and so on, because it's an uncountable noun, but it can be followed by a plural verb in scientific English. You could say are and indicate. And we are writing, of course, academic English. It's scientific. We are reporting data. Okay. The second sentence, social media is indicated by the pie chart data to be the primary news source for under 25s in Brazil. Now I want you to pause the video and try to decide for each point of these 5 points, which sentence is better, the first one or the second one, and come back when you're done. Let's now look at these sentences. For the first point, the first sentence is more natural because the second one, while it's grammatically possible, feels unnatural. Verbs for describing visual data, such as indicate, show, reveal, demonstrate, or suggest, are rarely used in the passive in this way, in this context. Okay, so social media is indicated by the pie chart data to be the prime. No, is indicated. We don't use these verbs that describe visual data in the passive. We say that the pie chart data indicate that the primary news source for under 25s in Brazil is social media. This is more natural. 2. One thing we can see from the data is that some media sources are less popular than 20 years ago. And the other sentence, one thing that can be seen from the data is that some media sources are less popular than 20 years ago. Of course, the second one is more logical and more natural because the first one use we, which sounds informal for a report. So using the passive here gives the report a more objective tone. Okay, we don't see anything. We are just reporting the data. So one thing that can be seen by anyone who reads the report. Okay, so you can say you can use the passive in this sentence. It's actually good. 3. The number of online newspaper subscriptions has increased by 20% since 2005 or has been increased by 20% since 2005. The first sentence actually makes sense. It's more natural. The second one gives the impression that someone caused or made the number of subscriptions increase. We don't usually use verbs of increase or decrease, like rise, fall, go up, go down, grow, reduce, and so on, or fall in the passive form in this kind of report. So no one caused this to happen. Okay, so we don't say has been increased. No, we say has increased. The numbers has increased. The number has increased. 4. The data revealed that the most popular news stories are sports stories, followed in second place by political news. It's revealed by the data. That's the most important news stories are sport stories, blah, blah, blah. The same thing. The first sentence is more natural because we don't use verbs for describing visual data in the passive that way. The data reveal. Of course, we don't say that the data revealed, because we said that data here is can be followed by a plural verb in scientific English. The last one, between 2005 and 2015, the proportion of over 40s using online news sites was almost doubled, or using online news sites almost doubled. Of course, the second one is better, because the first one, as we said previously, gives the impression that somebody caused this. Somebody or someone doubled the number. Okay, this should be avoided. Sometimes a single pie chart will not provide enough data for writing 150 words. So you may get 2 or even 3 pie charts. You can also get one pie chart along with a bar chart or even a table. You could get a bar chart with a table. So it's crucial that you describe the key information revealed by the data rather than just giving a list of numbers. Selecting the most significant data from both charts and make comparisons between them. I know that you might think this is a bit difficult or very difficult. I can assure you it's not. You will just follow the same steps. It will just take longer to look at the 2 charts together, but given practice, you will be fine. You will do fine. Okay. Here we have 2 pie charts. We have the pie charts compare ways of accessing the news in the UK and Brazil. So this is the UK, how people access the news in the UK, and this is how people access the news in the UK, in Brazil, I'm sorry. And you have 5 keys: TV, radio, print, online, not specified. We need to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. And we need to write at least 150 words. Usually you have 20 minutes to write the report, but for now you need to take as much time as you need. Just give me something good, okay? Write as better as you can, or as good as you can. So let's talk about reporting the main features. We need to just write notes, okay, about the main features before starting to write the report itself. We need to write just notes about the main features. You can do that on the paper, okay, on the exam paper, on the exam sheet. I need to talk about the similarities first, then the differences. Here you have TV. It's in the UK 41%, and in Brazil it's 38%. So there is a similarity in accessing the news through TV in both countries, almost the same. But I need to report, actually, there is something significant here. In Brazil, 53% of people access the news through the internet, online, I mean, and this is much more than in the UK. But of course, this has an effect on the other categories, okay? Which means that, actually, let's continue. Let's continue. 3, reporting the differences between the 2 countries in accessing the news through radio and print. Okay, now that I talked about the TV and access the news online, I need to talk about radio and print. Of course, the UK people there access the news through the radio and the print. The numbers, the percentages are much higher. Okay. Now I need to report something, the last thing, the not specified percentage. This is the tiny minority that did not specify how they access the news. They didn't say how they do it. Okay, so these are the main features. Now that I have my main features, I can start writing. First of all, I need an introduction. We said that an introduction is just paraphrasing of the question, okay, using your own words. Then an overview, which is a summary of the key features in the data. Then I need to report the main features, but I need to use percentages and fractions. Don't use fractions alone. Don't use percentages only. Use both, a variety of both. Use language of comparison, like whereas, while, and so on. You can use on the other hand, and so on. Use high-level vocabulary, then conclude your report with 2 sentences or something like that. Let's check out how we can write the report. Let's begin with the introduction. The introduction is the paraphrasing of the question in your own words. The pie charts show the principal ways of finding out the news in 2 different countries, the UK and Brazil. I could say the pie charts illustrates the main ways of finding out the news in 2 countries, but principle is much stronger. Okay, that now moving on to the overview, which is a summary of the data in the 2 charts. The 2 nations show broadly similar patterns for obtaining the news, and I said here for obtaining the news. The question says accessing the news. You can't just repeat the same thing. Obtaining the news, not accessing the news. Through the though there are some differences, both significant and minor. This is not true, it's though. Okay, so remove the R letter. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Now I need to report those 5 key features. Reporting the first key feature. Similarity in online access. By the way, this is a comment. This is not part of the report. Okay, this is just a comment because we are explaining how to structure your report. Then we will be talking about our first key feature, the similarity in online access. One of the most prominent features of this data is that over a third of people access the news online in the UK, whereas in Brazil, the figure is more than half at 53%. As you can see, we are comparing talking about 2 pie charts at the same time. So I need to be comparing data from different pie charts. We said here we have the UK and Brazil. The people who use or access the news through TV, in both countries, there is a similarity between them. Only 3% difference. Okay, and we used fractions. We said, if you go back to the report, one of the most prominent features of this data is that over a third of people access the news online in the UK. Okay, over a third of people. Whereas in Brazil, the figure is more than, this is about online access, I'm sorry, not TV. This is about online access. The figure is more than half at 53%. So we said over a third of people and more than half at 53%. Sometimes you need to be more specific. So use the fraction, then use the percentage. More than half at 53%. And we said here, over a third of people access the news. Reporting the second key feature, similarity in TV access. It's apparent, or I could say it's obvious, that viewing the TV news is popular in both countries, with about 2/5 of the UK population favoring this mode of delivery and only 3% fewer in Brazil. Of course, 3% fewer because I'm talking about people, and people is a countable noun. It's a plural noun of person. Okay, so I said fewer, not less. Um, Here I'm comparing, I'm taking data from both pie charts at the same time and writing a sentence about them. It's apparent that viewing the TV news is popular in both countries. It's popular. This is a fact. I'm not talking about my personal opinion here. With about 2/5 of the UK population favoring this mode of delivery and only 3% fewer in Brazil. So it's popular in Brazil, but only 3% fewer. Now I need to report the third key feature. Now I'm going to be talking about the differences in reading and print. Reading and print, I'm sorry. Printed newspapers, I mean. One major difference that can be seen between, I could use can be seen as passive here, it's fine, okay? It can be seen by anyone who reads the report, so it's fine. Between the UK and Brazil is that over twice as many people read, not read, I'm sorry, read the news in print in the formal compared with the later. The figures are 15% and 6% respectively. So this is one major difference that can be seen between the UK and Brazil, is that over twice as many people read the news in print in the formal. Formal refers back to the UK. This is referencing, you refer back to the same thing using maybe a pronoun or a noun. So the former refers back to the UK, compared with the later refers back to Brazil. And then you list the figures. Now I will be talking about the differences in the radio group between the two pie charts. Similarly, I mean similarly to the previous sentence, similarly is a word that we can use to connect sentences, okay? I'm saying that the following sentence has a similarity to the previous sentence somehow, because it will be talking about the difference. Listening to the news on the radio is preferred by 3 times more people in the UK than in Brazil. So the UK still favor, I mean the people in the UK still favor or prefer the radio and reading newspapers. Okay, now reporting the tiny minority, the not specified group. While a tiny minority of people, only 1%, do not specify how they access the news in Brazil, the number of people for the same category in the UK is twice as much. Actually, you could, this is not actually very important to report. You could leave this out. It doesn't really matter. This is not a key feature. It's a feature, but it's not a key feature. So you could leave this out. It doesn't really matter. Okay, this is the whole report. The pie chart, the pie charts actually, in your introduction and overview, you have to be talking about both of them. Okay, both of them. Don't talk about only one of them. Talk about both. The pie charts show, not shows, because you're talking about two pie charts. The principal ways of finding out the news in two different countries, the UK and Brazil. The two nations show, or countries, but we said in the first sentence, we said countries in the introduction. So in the overview, you could use a different word, a synonym. Don't try to use the same word or words all over again. I mean, over and over again. The two nations show broadly similar patterns for obtaining the news. I said obtaining, not accessing. Though there are some differences, both significant and minor. Then we have here the two paragraphs. You can read it to understand. You can read it as many times as you want. It's fine. We talked about the similarities between the accessing the news or obtaining the news through online access. I mean, the internet, via the internet or TV. Then we talked about the differences in print and radio. Then we have here our conclusion. In conclusion, it can be said that the high levels of internet use in Brazil mean that other methods such as radio and print are used less in comparison with the UK. This is a very good conclusion. You are just summarizing the visual data that the online access in Brazil means that the other methods such as radio and print are used less in comparison with the UK. Okay. Okay, thank you for watching the lesson. See you soon, inshallah, and I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Goodbye.